Good morning, guys. Seems like people are still joining, but that's what I said. As we are reaching towards the last session, it seems like people are reluctant to join the sessions. Partially, maybe there is something wrong. That's what I was wondering, like what went wrong in between. Or maybe partially it's because the topics are getting much difficult to understand, much advanced. I hope maybe that could be the reason. Or maybe people are getting so much buried in other works, so probably they're not able to join the sessions. I don't know what's currently the current status is, but that's what my observation is. Anyways, so we'll have to continue. We'll have to look at the next topic, like next package, and this is going to be a little bit kind of industry standard package we are going to look at. So there we will see how to make your application kind of giving you the final year exam. Okay. Maybe the package which we are going to give, we are going to study today is kind of giving you the data over something called the REST APIs. So that's what we are going to start today, or we are going to finish today. Not only start, we are going to finish today as well. Okay, so I think let's continue quickly. I'll just give you first the heads up, what exactly that package is all about. What do you mean by REST APIs? How they are going to help you to make your data available to the other applications over the internet. It could be a web application, it could be a mobile application, and still your data will be available for all of the other applications, all of the other clients. So that is the package we are going to look at, called as a Flask, which will enable our Python application to send the data over something called as JSON, and which will make your application kind of maybe platform independent. In a sense, you can use that application, you can consume those REST APIs, maybe in the mobile side of it or in the web side of it. So let us first understand the concept behind it. Writing code is a piece of cake if you understand the concept behind it. That's what I believe. So let's continue here and say, first, what exactly the concept is. We'll understand that, and then probably we'll see how we should write the code for it. Okay. Now, generally what happens here is, I know you might have heard about this story before, or you might have known to this fact, but this is again a kind of quick introduction. So I can't just let it just pass by. So it's better I can just cover it very quickly. Now, generally what happens here is, when you want to surf a website, let's say I want to search on Google something, or I want to, let's say I want to go to a website and I want to, read the information. I want to purchase a product on Amazon, or if I want to watch a movie on Netflix. So whenever we want to go to a website, we generally open the browser-like application, and then we use an URL here. So this is the URL. For example, I may say http:// say google.com or go.co.in, whatever it is. And then magically, it shows me the web page which I see right now here. Or probably if I go to netflix.com, it probably magically, I don't know how, but magically it just shows me this web page where I can log in with my credentials. I can start watching the number of movies out there. So I just want to reveal some secrets behind it, like what happens behind the scene, because if you understand this, believe me, writing code would be very simple for you. So whenever you are opening a browser and typing a kind of URL there, let us see what happens behind the scene, so that it will be easy for us to judge how the web page is getting loaded here. What is the web page and how the web page is getting loaded here. Again, let me clear myself. We are not at all going to learn HTML, JavaScript, and CSS programming here. We are not for web development here. We are Python developers, and I want to take an advantage of Python language and to make my data available to the rest of the world. So I have my data somewhere, maybe in the MySQL database. I have some, just kind of information to share with my clients. And I want to do that maybe in a certain fashion. With that, maybe I can ask my mobile applications, or I can ask my websites to grab the data from my application and display them in a various different fashion. So what we are going to learn today is like a kind of a mediator between the database and something called as a, I'm sorry, it's just went here. A mediator between a database and something called as a client application. So let us understand how it happens behind the scene and what does it do. To understand this, let me open notes. Do I have notes somewhere? Because I already have created notes for this, and I bet on that it will be easy for you to even understand this if you have something in front of you. Okay, so this is Python. It's not for you, not this one. I do have web. Here it is. Exactly. So when you talk about the website, let us first understand what happens behind the scene, and then let us come back and try to imitate the same thing by using our Python application. So generally, when you go to a website, any website, I'm looking at the first page. This is generally called the starter page of google.com. When I see that, I know for sure that this web page is not on my machine. I mean, when I just go here and say google.com, I'm damn sure that whenever I hit this URL, whatever I see here, which is not there on my machine, it's stored somewhere, somewhere on the somewhere in the internet, somewhere on the server there. So which server is it stored on, or where that machine is? I don't know what exactly the machine or where exactly the machine is in the world, because it's an internet, and internet is nothing but a cloud. And probably when you say cloud, probably those machines are kind of invisible to you. So they are somewhere in the some part of the world. But for us, it's somewhere, and I can get the data from, or I can get the web page from that machine. So that some machine, which is hypothetical machine for me right now, is right here. This is the one. And on this machine, I have installed an operating system like Linux, for example. Doesn't matter which operating system is there, but most of the times when you talk about internet, you talk about something like a Linux. Linux is a very, you can say, fundamental operating system for a server machine. So basically, this is the server machine, and I'm going to say that this is the Linux server machine. Let's say I'm a developer, and I have developed a websites for my client. So basically, I have a couple of websites with me, and I want my websites to be visible by rest of the world. Now, when I say rest of the world, imagine that there is a person sitting here, maybe, and this person wants to browse the website which is stored on that particular, that particular machine somewhere there. So how is it possible for him to get the website which is stored on this machine? Now, when I say website, of course, there will be some pages, like something like an index.html, for example, or let's say profile.jpg, bmp, png, whatever it is, I don't care. Let's say maybe I'll say profile, or maybe I'll say let's say tweets, for example, .php to just give me the list of tweets, and so on and so forth. So there are a number of files here. I'm just giving you a couple of them for now. So, or maybe one more, let's say styles.css. You are not going to understand, or you don't need to understand what exactly those file will contain within them. But just understand that there are some files which are part of my website. So these files are stored inside a kind of a machine, which we generally call it as a server machine. So this is kind of a server machine. Very nice. Now this server machine, if I want to access it from my machine, so this is a user, for example, and user is having his laptop or his desktop machine, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Let's say this is the user, and the user is having his machine ready to browse that website. So from this machine, I want to access the website which is stored on a server machine out there. So how is it possible? It is possible because every machine in the internet is having a unique address, generally called as an IP address. It's called as a logical address. This is called as an IP address. Again, I'm assuming like you already know what IP addresses are used for and how they can be written. So for me, I'm going to say this is not 10, let's say 15.4.3. Whatever it is, I don't care. Just using some random IP address here, so that it will be easy for me to say that this machine can be uniquely identified throughout the world by using this IP address 15.3.5.6, whatever. Now, if I want to reach to that server, I'll have to open a special program on my machine. So this special program, we call it as a browser. So imagine that we are going to open a browser here on this machine, and probably using this program browser, I'm going to browse the website which is stored on that machine. So to be again on the same lines, I'm just saying that this is my program browser, and from this program, I want to get the website which in terms of that, in terms of this files, let's say I want to open that index.html on this browser which is stored on that server. So how do we do that? We do that by using something called as a URL. So this is what we generally go for, and we type it here. So this is generally called as a URL. Now, what is a URL? A URL is nothing but uniform resource locator. Uniform, it's just because it uses a similar format, or it uses few components with which you can browse or you can get whatever you are looking for. That's why it's called as a uniform. It's also called as a uniform because the same syntax, the same address is used across browsers. So no matter which browser you are using, though you are using Chrome, Firefox, Safari, let's say Opera, excuse me, and if you don't have anything, you have one of the worst browsers, let's say Internet Explorers. So basically you use any browser and you will find that whatever you write here is exactly similar. That's the reason why it's called as a uniform. Uniform, it's across all the browsers, across all the operating systems, it's going to be really similar. So uniform. Resource means any file which is stored on the server. Let's say index.html, profile.png, and so on and so forth. All of these files are called as resources. So we are going to locate those resources by using the something called as a locator. Uniform resource locator, the one which locates the resource uniformly. That's why it's called as uniform resource locator. How does it look like? So probably it looks like this: https://www/google.co.in. Not only this, there are various different forms, and if I look at this one, I already have given few examples of it. This is a URL. Sometimes you might see an IP address there, which I can easily do it here as well. So probably if I just go to my command prompt, say in this one, and if I say dig is the command to get the IP address of any domain. So probably it gives me an IP address of google.com. What is it? It seems like it's 7170.217.174.238, whatever. I'm just going to copy this and right here I'll put the IP address, not the google.com, but if I put the IP address, I again will go back to google.com. It's just because when you look at this diagram, you go by using a IP address or you go by using something called as a domain name, you still will end up going to the same machine, because sometimes it becomes really difficult to remember the IP address. And you see that right here. It becomes very difficult for me to remember this 170.217.174.238. But I think it's easy for me to understand or to remember google.co.in. And that's the reason why we generally assign few domain names. So basically becomes very difficult to remember that IP address. So I'm going to say my domain. This is called as a domain, mydomain.com. So this mydomain.com is the one with which we can easily reach to that server. Okay, as simple as that. So basically when you are talking about the URL will look like this. Either it can be in the form of this or it can be in the form of IP address. Sometimes you also will see something called as a port. Now what is a port? A port is a number with which we can identify the process with which we can get the number of files stored on that server. To make these files available to the rest of the world, we have to install an application here on this machine. We generally call this application as a web server. So probably I'll just go back here and say this is called as a web server. What is a web server? A web server is nothing but an application which will make sure that whenever someone hits this URL, it will send the response back, or it will send the file which the client is looking for. So this is generally a application which is stored on the server side. So this is a web server. For us, maybe I'll just make it a kind of, sure, it's something like this, better. We can do it in this way. So this is a web server probably. And for us, the web server here is nothing but an Apache. For example, Apache is one of the web servers out there. Now, whenever you start this web server, whenever you start this Apache on this machine, it starts two programs. One is going to listen the incoming request. The one who is looking for some file will send a request. Now, what is that request? I'll mention that in a second. So by default, it will start two servers. One of them will listen on port number 80. Now, port number 80 is the one on which it listens for HTTP protocol. So I hope you might have heard about HTTP before. So HTTP is the protocol with which it listens all the incoming requests and it sends the response back to the client. So this is HTTP. And on the similar lines, it creates or it starts one more server on port number 443. Remember that number 443 and 80, those are standard numbers. I mean, anywhere you go for HTTP or HTTPS, you still will go for these numbers. These are standard port numbers. Port is the way we are going to identify the process which is running the web server uniquely. So operating system identifies this web server by using port number 80 for HTTP and port 443 by using for HTTPS use. So this is the reason why we start a web server on a specific port. Not only this, there are various different protocols which are having their own port numbers assigned or predefined. HTTP, HTTPS, both of them are very common. That's the reason I'm giving you the examples of them. There are various other. Let's say there is FTP, there is SFTP, there is there is a POP3, that's POP3, there is IMMP, there are so many, SMTP, DNA, so on and so forth. There are many different options available there. There are many different protocols available there. So probably when you talk about those protocols are having a port number assigned, and that's 80 and 443 in case of HTTP and HTTPS. So basically, I want this website, which is giving me in the form of, let's say, index or HTML, this website. I want to browse it on my machine. Now, when I say it, I'm browsing it on my machine. The one where the browser is going to get open, this machine is generally called as a client machine. So this is my client machine. The client machine is having a browser installed on it, and the user is going to open the browser and is going to type that URL there. The URL might look something like this: http:// in my case it is mydomain.com. So I was telling you that whatever URL you are going to type here, it will be in the various different forms in a sense. It might be something like http://mydomain.com, or it could be something like http://15.3.5.6. Maybe it can use also the port number. It can also pass some file path here. This is called as a file path, and it can also pass some input parameters like question marks, first name is equals to user1, and so on and so forth. Or sometimes you might see a hash in between. When you talk about the URL, I said that the URL stands for Uniform Resource Locator. It's called as a uniform because it has 6 components in them, and those components are same across different browsers and different operating systems. When I say components, there are 6 components. The first component which you see here is called as a port number. It's called as the protocol. So probably this is the protocol, which is generally called as a scheme as well. So scheme here is HTTPS, or it can be HTTP, it can be file, it can be FTP, it can be anything here. So this is the first component in that in that URL. So this is HTTPS or HTTP. This tells the browser which protocol it has to follow, which instruction needs to be followed in order to send the request or get the response, or in order to ask the server to send us the file index or HTML. So in this case, I'm specifying that use the protocol HTTP, or use the protocol HTTPS, or use the protocol file, or use the protocol FTP, so on and so forth. The second component is either a domain name or IP address. Sometimes you can write the domain name like what I did here, or sometimes if you know the IP address, you can go for IP address, which I showed you earlier as well. After domain name, there has to be a port number. Now, sometimes you might specify the port number here like what I showed you here. Most of the times you don't, because most of the times those protocols, HTTP and HTTPS, which are associated with the port number 80 and 443, are by default used there. So for example, if I go back here and say google.co.in, I never have specified the port number. If I do not specify the port number, by default, it is going to get redirected to port number 80. So I'm sorry, here it's HTTPS, so it will redirect to port number 443. So even if I say 443, it is still going to give me the same output. It's been assumed that whenever you are using HTTPS, by default, the port number will be 443. And if it is a HTTP, then by default, it will be assumed as a port number 80. That's the reason it's not mandatory. Even if you do not specify it for HTTP, it is going to go for 80, and it's HTTPS, it's going to go for 443. The third component is called as a path or the file. Sometimes you might write the file name as well. For example, here I said something like myfile.html. In that case, for example. Next is the query string. Query string is the way you are going to pass parameters to your website. For example, along with the file name, I also want to pass some input parameters like the first name is equals to user1, or address is equals to Pune. Look at the way we are passing the parameters. It can be something like question mark, the key equals to value, ampersand, key equals to value. You can pass as many parameters as you want till it fits 1024 characters. Because ultimately we have to pass that in a number of characters in the URL. So it has a limitation. URL can be a maximum of 1024 characters, depending on the operating system, depending on the browser. But mostly it is 1024 characters. It has its own limitation. I agree with it, but still you can see that that's the simplest way to pass the parameters there. Fine. This is called as the query string. Now the last component here is the hash component. Mainly it is used for just linking different parts of the same page. I hope you might have seen a scenario like when you're browsing a website, sometimes the website is too long. I mean, you have to scroll a couple of times just to go to the end of the page. And then you'll find a button, let's say, or link, for example, on top, something like a top. You click on that and it automatically goes to the top of the page. If you have seen something like this functionality, this can be achieved by using something called as a hash component. Again, we're not here to go in details of them because this is a website related details, or it's kind of web development related details. I'm just giving you a heads up here. You know at least these things because the topic we are going to write here, or the topic we are going to discuss here, will require the foundation. This is the foundation. Unless you understand this, I can't go directly to the flask. So that's the reason I'm creating a foundation here. I'm going a little bit very quickly now. So basically what you see here is the way we are having a kind of a client and way we are going to have a kind of a server. This is generally called as a client side and this is generally called as a server side. Both of them are connected to each other by using something called as a cloud. Cloud is nothing but for me, it's internet. So instead of saying internet, I'm just going to show a cloud symbol, something like this. And probably you can understand, it looks like a cloud, I hope. And if it looks like a cloud, for me, this is nothing but an internet, you know. So this is nothing but the internet, or this is nothing but the cloud, whatever you say, with which we are connecting the client to the server. So internet. Okay, so both of them are connected to internet. That's what the point here is. Okay, now let us understand what happens here. So probably I'll just go back, put it right here, and then I can say, this is my internet and I'm sorry, this is my internet, and probably from this internet, let's connect this server, right? Okay, sorry. Maybe I'm just gonna go back here and say, coming back here and say, here it is. So I've connected my machine, server machine to the internet. Now, whenever you type this URL here, let me just go back to the browser. Whenever you type this URL here and press enter, now what happens behind the scene? Behind the scene, it goes, the browser goes ahead and browser creates an object, something called as a request. Now, this is called as a HTTP request object, which is very common. And I hope those who already have heard about HTML or simple website development, they might have heard about this. This is called as HTTP request. Now, what is it? The HTTP request is an object. HTTP request is an object which is created by a browser which has two parts within it. Now, when I say two parts, this is the first part and this is the second part. Let us understand what is there inside the first and what is there inside the second part. The first part is called as a header. So this is not at all related to the HTML head and HTML body. Probably those who are familiar with HTML, they might come back and say, oh, is it similar to HTML body or HTML head? No, that's a completely different story. This is where all the key value pairs will be added in order to understand what exactly you are looking from the client side. So these key value pairs will help server to understand the requirement of a client. For example, if client is saying, hey, I need something like http://mydomain.com. So it will try to put some information there. It will say, hey, I'm going to use a protocol. So protocol, which is a kind of HTTP here. Okay. Next, the port number, because I did not mention here, by default port, the protocol is HTTP, so it's going to specify the port number is 80. Maybe it's going to say the path or the URL, whatever. Sometimes it takes path, sometimes it takes URL. For me, I didn't mention anything here right after that. So if it is nothing, then by default it comes here as a slash. If it is like this URL, for example, this URL has a path of /myfile, for example, you know. Next, is there any query string? No, there is no query string. So query string will be blank because we don't have any input parameters here inside this one. Other than that, it also will tell me like what kind of method I have used here. Now understand that by default, browser uses a method get. Get means I'm looking for something. Maybe look at the look at this from the browser's point of view. Browser is going to get the file index.html or file. Let's say slash here. Slash is nothing but the default file. So it is going to look for the file slash to get it from the server. So that's the reason by default the method is used here as a get. So this is how it is going to do the job. It also will use the protocol HTTP version 1.1. That's the default one. So it's going to go for that. And there are a bunch of other parameters out there. Again, I'm not going to tell all of them. There are many actually, but we're not interested in all of them. See, again, this is more or less required for web development. We are here just to get the foundations ready. So once we understand what exactly there in the HTTP request, that HTTP request will be sent. Oh, I forgot to add one more thing, which is really necessary. The domain name or something like an IP address. So for me, the domain name here is, what's that? mydomain.com. Unless it is there, how will you go to that domain, you know? So that is a domain, mydomain.com, for example, or maybe you can say the IP address, doesn't matter. It's not able to fit here. So I'm going to just make it a little bit reduced, say something like this. Okay, that makes sense. And let's put it right here. So basically it gets all the information in the form of key and value. These are all keys, and next to them, these are all values. So all these key value pairs will be added in the header. Body is right now empty this point because we don't have any parameter which is in the body for now, at least in this request. So whatever the request is created, that request will be sent to the internet. Now from internet, of course, we already have mentioned which domain I want to reach, or what is an IP address, either domain name or the IP address. If you are specifying the domain name, I hope you know the story there. It will go to a DNS server, it will fetch the IP address of that domain name, and it will go to the actual IP address or actual machine there. So assume that you have created that request object and you have sent that request object to the server machine. Now what the server does? Server, that's operating system Linux, is going to grab that request and will say, oh, it seems like the port number 80. So Linux sends that incoming request to the web server, which is running on port number 80, because Linux knows that there is a program which is generally called as a web server listening on port number 80 for incoming requests. So Linux forwards this request to the web server. So in short, look at the big picture. I'm on client machine. I've opened a browser. I've let's say return something like http://mydomain.com, pressed enter. Behind the scene, browser has created that request, and the request has got sent to the server. Server has sent that to the web server, and finally the request has been reached to the server, the web server precisely. Web server, upon receiving the request, try to digest what exactly the client is looking for. Now server says, oh, it seems like this is meant for me. Okay, it seems like it's using a protocol HTTP 1.1, means I have to talk to the client in terms of HTTP protocol 1.1 specification. Port number it is for it, so it ignores that. The main thing it looks for is this one, the path. So what is the path here? Seems like slash. Now web server knows, like whenever someone looks for a slash, by default it is going to return something like an index or HTML. So basically, if you do not specify anything right here, if you just go back here and say, if you do not specify anything here, by default it will give you index or HTML. I mean, not only index or HTML, you can configure it on the server side. Again, we are not here for web server administration, but just assume that the web server knows what to return in case if it receives a request which is looking for path slash. So just assume that it is going to return index or HTML. So the web server, upon receiving the request, looks at the slash and it understands, so this client is looking for a file named index or HTML. So what does it do? Maybe it simply goes to that folder where the website is located. And generally, I didn't mention that it's not too much. I mean, it seems like it's going to be a little bit too much of details here, but it's okay. Let me mention anyways. Generally, when you're talking about the Linux and when you're talking about a web server like Apache, it stores all those website pages to a location /var/www/html. So something like this, you know. So it goes to that folder and it picks up the file which is configured for slash. Just assume that this is the index or HTML it is looking for. So it finds that file here, somewhere here. So it loads the file in a memory. It get the contents of it, and then it sends that contents of that file to the server, to the client. But how does it send that? To send this, the contents of this index or HTML, like HTTP request, it creates another object. See, HTTP request object has been created by the client. So client created it by adding all the details client wanted to send to the server. Now it's a server's turn. Server needs to send this data or response back to the client. So server creates something called as HTTP response. I hope you can understand this. HTTP response is nothing but a response which is going to get sent to the client for responding to the request client has made. So client has made a request. Now server is responding to it. Kind of acknowledgement. Yeah, you can think of it like this, but more or less it's generally called as a response. Now who is creating it? It's getting created by the web server. So web server, after processing the request, after looking at the contents of it, after reading the contents of that file which it has asked for, it creates a response object. Now, like HTTP request, this response object is also going to have two things. One is the header and the other one is the body. So let me just come back here and say this is the header bar, which is right there on the top, like what we have seen in the HTTP request case. And there will be a body in the bottom part of it. So this is the body part and this is the header part. Now, when you say a body or header, I mean, did you see something here? I showed that body and header kind of unequal in this case in HTTP request, but it's kind of, sometimes I should have shown a header a little bit smaller and a body a little bit bigger because of the way the response is getting constructed. In a response case, the header is also going to have similar key value pairs. But in this case, it is going to have something called as a status. Status will tell me like what exactly is the status of the request processing. So for example, if I look for, or if I ask the server to give me the index.html file, unfortunately, the web server has already found the index.html file there. It literally copies that HTML file and it copies the contents of it. So maybe I'll say contents of a requested file. So this is the contents of requested file will be placed right inside that body. So the body will contain all the contents of that file, but because it has already found that index.html, it says that, hey, I found the index file you are looking for. So the status here is kind of 200. 200 is generally called as an OK. OK means it's success. It represents a success because, we look for a file, let's say index.html, and index.html is present on the server. Server could find it. That's the reason it says that status is equals to 200 OK. Status is very useful. Not only useful, it's very important. Unless the status is right, you will not be able to get anything on the client side. So status codes are very important. There are 5 types of status codes. I already have mentioned that in your so-called notes. I'm going to share that right after the session. So probably you just scroll down and you see that there are 5 types of status codes or status categories precisely. These are the 5 status code categories, not 5 status codes I'm saying. These are 5 status code types or categories. It's called as 1xx, 2xx, 3xx, 4xx, and 5xx. For example, 1xx meaning any status code starting with number 1, it represents a debugging or informational messages. This is not for you people. I mean, this is for the web server, which is kind of, just going for sending the information just for itself. I mean, it just puts that informational message for itself. This is not for you. 200 or 2xx messages are representing success. For example, the one which I mentioned right now, 200 means it's okay. 201 means successfully created. 202 means successfully accepted, so on and so forth. There are many codes there in this category, but all of them will represent the success condition. Now it comes 3xx. Any status code starting with 3 represents a redirection. You might have seen sometimes you type google.com, it automatically goes to google.co.in. How does it happen? How does it know that it has to go to google.co.in? It knows that because of this status code here. So whenever you are sending a request to that server, the server knows that the domain you are looking for is not available on this machine. It has moved it to some other machine. So it gives you different options, different choices by sending a response with the status code 300. Browser knows that 300 means it's a redirection. So it looks at one of them and it goes to that particular server. So this is how it does behind the scene. Anyways, status code starting with 3 will represent a redirection. Status code starting with 4 will represent something like a client error. For example, if I'm looking for something, let's say in back to that diagram, if I'm looking for something like mypage.html, you see that the mypage.html isn't there. So probably if I send a request saying, hey, give me mypage.html, and if web server knows that this web page is not available, mypage.html isn't there in that directory, how does it let the client know that the file is not there? So it sends a response with the status code, sometimes very famous. It's called as a file not found, 404. You see that 404 starts with 4. So 4 category status codes represent the client error. One of the maybe the well-known status codes is 404, file not found, and it's very predictable here as well. So I know gold.com doesn't have anything like myfile.txt. So if I just try to look at this, it sends a kind of a error, something like 404. 404 means the file is not available on the server. It's called as a client-side error. Sometimes you will see a bad request. Sometimes you will see the page you are trying to go there is unauthorized. Or sometimes you'll see if you are trying to access the page where it's kind of forbidden because the method is not allowed there, so on and so forth. There are a number of reasons there, but all of them will represent the client error, the error which is caused because of the client request. Last is the 5xx. It's generally called the 500 series. It's a 500 series response status. What it represents the error, but it does not represent a client error. It represents an error which is caused on the server side. Caused on the server side means caused on this side. See, ultimately there will be a program which is running on this machine. So if this program is having some problem, then it is going to give you a response with the status code as 500 series. It can be 500 internal server error, it can be 501 not implemented, 502 bad gateway, so on and so forth. There can be anything, but all of them are generally known as the status codes. So status codes are of 5 different categories. I'm not saying there are 5 status codes. There are 5 type of different categories. 100 series, 200 series, 300 series, 400 series, and 500 series. 100 series information messages, 200 series success, 300 series redirection, 400 series client error, and 500 series server error. Other than that, it also puts the content type and content length. So let me just change this here. I'll say content type. Now, what is a content type? Content type is nothing but the type of content it is sending through that body. So probably in this case, it is sending HTML file. So it says that, hey, I'm sending you a text file, which is of type HTML. This is called as a content type. Along with this, it also sends the content size. Probably, for example, I'm saying this is of 500 kilobytes. 500 kilobytes, whatever. So depending on the size it is sending, it will just update that information right here inside the response header. There are different other key value pairs as well. I'm simply skipping them for now. So what happens here is, again, you see that the client has created a request. Request is having header and body. Header contains all the key value pairs along with the information the client wants to send to the server. Server grabs the request and it understands, okay, client is looking for this. It goes back to the directory. It finds out the file. If it finds the file, it says the status code is equal to 200. It puts the contents of that file inside the body and it sends that response back to the client, back to the browser. So this is generally what is going to happen in the real world. And I'm not making up any story. This is the real story. What happens behind the scene when you are going back on browser anytime and typing the URL, pressing enter and getting the output because of it. So this is what happens behind the scene. There are two sides of it. One is called as a client side. Maybe I can just say that on the left hand side, because I find a browser there, I'm going to say that this is the client. This is generally called as a client side. This side is generally called as the client side. And on the other side, there is server one. So that's called as a server side. Now, your program can run on the client side or on the server side, depending on what functionality you are looking for. So a program, a web development program or a web program can be of two types. It can be of type client side or it can be of type server side. If you are going for a client side development, this is again just for your extra knowledge, nothing to do with the actual Python development, but still, when you're talking about the client side development, there are only three options for you. It can be HTML, it can be CSS, and it can be JavaScript. So probably when you talk about these languages, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, these languages, if you're developing your program only with these languages, then you're set to be developing an application on the client side. A client is nothing but a browser. And the browser here is the one which is going to understand and execute your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code. That's the reason it's set to be a client side languages, and using that program, you are going to execute the application by the browser itself. So that's HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which is on the client side. Now, what happens here is most of the times these days when we are talking about the actual web applications, most of the times, let's say take an example of say Amazon, take an example of let's say Flipkart, or take an example of something like a Netflix, and so on and so forth. There are many different examples out there. So probably if you take an example of all of them, you will understand that we are having persistent information. And when I say persistent information, I'm again referring to the fact that they are using database behind the scene. We already have seen how database works last time, how we can contact the database, how we can just send the database request or send the database queries and get the result out of the database. So when you talk about such database, where the database is it available on the client side or is it available on the server side? The answer to that question is simply that server is going to have the database, or a database will be installed on the server, or the data will be kept on the server side. Naturally, because we don't want that data to be available on the client side, or we don't want to install that database and configure the data on the client side. So database will be always created on the server side somewhere here. Now see the limitation and see what is the solution they have found here. So probably again, like last time, this is the database, So this database right here is going to store my data. It can be a MySQL database, it can be MongoDB, it can be anything right there. So depending again on your requirement, depending again your choice, you might have selected something like a MySQL database. This is the database, and the database is having the data which I want to persist here. Of course, the database is installed on this machine, meaning this is how it is connected to it. Now imagine that you are going to run or you are going to develop an application which will get the data from user and which wants to store the data in the MySQL. Now, because the data is not here on the client side, you cannot write this program in HTML, CSS, and JS and run this on the client side. So whenever you want to store the data is connected, a database is connected to the server. That means you have to execute that program on the server side. And that's where the server side programming comes into picture. So basically, when you talk about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, you are talking from the client's perspective. When you want to execute that application on the server side to store the data, mainly to store the data on the database side, so you have to write the application in one of these languages, and there are many actually. So for client side, you have only three options: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But for server side, there are many options. One of the options is Python. So Python can be used as server-sided programming language. So ultimately, the only statement which I want to make here, I want you to understand here is like Python is one of the server-sided programming language, which can be used for developing the server-sided components. Now, what do you mean by that? That's what we are going to do here with the help of Flask application. So Python is one of them. Maybe another very famous is called the PHP. Another one which is very famous is something like a Perl. Another one, there are many actually. Another one is server-sided JavaScript, generally known as a Node.js. For example, Node.js is not it's not a programming language. It's the framework which is developed on top of JavaScript. Then there is something like .NET, which you generally call it as a C# or C#.NET, what you can say. Another one which is very famous is Java. Another one very famous, something called as a Ruby, and so on and so forth. So there are many different languages out there which can be thought of something like a server-sided programming languages. And one of them, and one of the simplest one to write the program, is nothing but the Python. And that's the reason why we are going to look at a package called as a Flask in order to develop an application which will run on the server side of this diagram. So basically, if you look at this diagram very quickly, let's revise it. There is a client side, there is a server side. On the client side, we are having an application called as a browser. On the server side, we are having an application, or we are having a kind of a server running, generally called as a web server. For example, it's an Apache or some other options available there. I already have mentioned them right inside this one. So probably when you get a chance, you can take a look at that. So I already have mentioned like Apache, IIS, Glassfish, and so on and so forth. Different type of servers I already have mentioned there. Anyways, so when you talk about the server side is the one where the website is being hosted or website is being copied. Server is the one where the web server is created or where web server is configured, or server is the one where the database is also installed. So precisely, server is the main machine where we are having every single thing in a central position. So all the clients will talk to the server and will get the data from it. So whenever you are going back to the browser and typing something like this, it goes to some of the servers there and fetches the data. And just to understand it really does it, or just to prove the fact that it really does it, I'm going to show you an example of it here. So you can go back to the this menu here, go to more tools and go to developer tools. It's not for you actually, it's for web developers, but because anyways, I just want to tell you like what happens behind the scene, and whatever I just mentioned here, it's very true, or it's very practical knowledge that I'm just telling you. So I can show you that practically. So whenever you are in Chrome or whenever you are in Firefox or any other browser, just go to development tools. In the development tools, you will find a tab generally called as a network tab. This is the network tab. So if I just say refresh, or if I just go to any of the browser there, you can see that there are so many entries here. One of the entries is nothing but www.google.co.in. So this or all of them are nothing but the requests. So these are the requests, and for every request we are getting a response back, and that response is kind of getting shown on this UI. Look at this. So we have sent a request and we have got the response, exactly what I just mentioned earlier. So you see that the status code and all of these things here. If you just see the request, that's what I said earlier. There is authority, or you can say the domain name, which is something like google.co.in. The method is something like a get. Path is something like a slash, because I didn't mention anything. The scheme is nothing but HTTPS. It's called as a protocol also, something like HTTPS, and so on and so forth. Now, when this request is kind of processed by the server, Google server precisely, the Google server is going to give you the response. The response will contain all of these things. If you look at this one, you have the status here, which I mentioned earlier. There is a content length, which in this case is 64 bytes, I guess. And probably the content type is again text/HTML, which I just mentioned last time. So depending on what response we are getting here, these fields might change. Content type might change, content length might change, but the concept is going to be remain same. For example, if you look at, let's say this one, or if you look at this one, both of them are icons. So probably if I just find out a request for icon, you will see that those are images, not the text file. So probably if I just go back, and if I look at this one, this is a Google, this is a kind of an image, I guess. So if I look at this image, this is the image we have just received from google.com, which is somewhere here. You see that the content type is not a text, it's an image of type PNG. So probably this is how it is. Those who are coming from the network, where I was there to talk about the networking last time, those who you can recall, I mentioned this last time as well. This is called as a content type, which is a job of a presentation layer to decide the common file format. So this is an image slash PNG or text slash HTML and so on and so forth, right? So those who can recall, for them, this is a kind of a presentation layers job. Anyways, so coming back to the context again. So this is how the browser is going to send the request. Let me come back to the diagram. And the request is going to get processed by the server, and server is going to give the response back to the client. That's how it is. Anyways, let me save this diagram before I forget. So where are we? In the same directory, right? Very good. So this is SCPT, I'm sorry, SCPT 30_1. So that will give you an overall idea about what happens behind the scene. This is generally called as a web architecture. So the web architecture will tell you like how the web server works behind the scene. It works by using a request and response pattern. It sends a request and gets the response. So that is generally called as a request response pattern. Okay, so now we have understood this. Now let's continue the same diagram in a little bit different context, not different, but say continued context. So this is the general web architecture. Now imagine that I don't want to design a website. See, ultimately what you see here is the website. The website is there. The website is kind of showing me the output. Or let's go to the Amazon.com. I see the output here. Or probably if I just go to Amazon.com's web application, if I open the Amazon.com on my website, I'm sorry, on my mobile phone, I would see exactly same number of products, exactly same description, exactly same prices, and all of these things will be exactly similar. You know what? So I am just wondering, like, how come it is possible that a website and a mobile application, both of them are showing exactly similar output, exactly similar number of products? How is it possible? Now it's possible because of this architecture. I want to continue this architecture in the next diagram and see what happens behind the scene. Please pay attention to this diagram very well, because this is going to lead to the package we are going to use. The last diagram is creating a foundation. I hope it must have created a foundation now. On top of it, we are adding one more layer. Now this will give you a kind of way to implement something called as a REST APIs. So let us understand the requirement and let us see how it can be implemented in the real world. And this is what we are going to do in a minute once we are done with this diagram. Okay, let's understand this now. Like last time, I'm going to have a server which is going to have a database there. So probably what I'm saying here is this is the server. I'm sorry, haha. It has to be rectangle, isn't it? So this is a server probably. And the server is having, let's say, the database installed, like what I said last time. So I'm just going to go for a little bit depth, because this is what we have to implement now practically. So probably I'll say that this is my server, and probably I'll just get this one here. Don't want to write the diagram, don't want to create diagram again. It's better we can just copy and paste it. Sometimes copy paste helps, you know. So this is a database here, and this database is having, let's say, number of tables in it. Now probably, if I'm not mistaken, I think let me open my MamPro. And let me start my MySQL. And if I'm not mistaken, we created a database last time. I don't remember the name of the database, but I still can guess it by looking at it. So it's in my /mam/ sorry, mam/ what the hell, /mam/ library /bin /mysql -u root -b root. I'll say show databases. Persons DB, very good. So yeah, that's correct. This is the persons DB. So let's assume that this is the persons DB. This is the database we are using. We have used last time. And let's say how many tables are there? I think we have only one table for now. Let's say person. Okay. So there is a table like a person. And let's say I'm going to create a very quick table. Let's say create a table product, which is going to have the product information. ID, which is integer, again, primary key. There is a product title, let's say 100 characters long, and let's say description, which can be a varchar of 1,000 characters, and let's say a price, which is of type float, you know. So it's a very simple table. I will paste it right here on your chat so that you can also have the same table in that database, because we have to get the data from these two tables and then we have to send them back to the client, you know. So be ready for that. So this is a kind of table that we are going to have inside my tables, inside my database. So if I say show tables, it seems like we are having two tables in it, person and a product. Let's look at the real diagram now. So this is a database. A database is having, at least in this case, there are two tables. Now I'm just going to represent them here. One of them is kind of the table person, and the another one is kind of table person, and the another one is the table product. So we have these two tables, and let's say the data is stored in those two tables, and I want to make those tables available to the rest of the world. Now, how do we do that? Now, please understand this requirement. This is going to be important for you to understand, because this is what Flask is going to do for us. So let us see how does it do it. There are other sets of table as well. We are not doing them, or we are not creating them right now. But in the real world, you might have many different tables there. So the story is going to remain same. So this is the MySQL table, which is going to get created on this machine, which is generally called as a server, which is going to have, let's say, mydomain.com, for example, sorry, mydomain.com, which is also going to have a IP address 15.3.5.6, the one which I used last time. And probably this is how it is going to be configured for. So basically, this is the IP address. This is the server I've created, which is having a database like MySQL, and so on and so forth. So precisely when you talk about this server here, the server is going to have the MySQL database, and I want that database to be shared by my, let's say, my websites as well as my mobile applications. So how do we do that? That's the question. So probably there is a website somewhere here. Maybe a user is going to open that website on a desktop machine. At the same time, user might open the application on a mobile as well. So think about this like a mobile device and a desktop device, a desktop or a laptop device. So there are two types of applications we are going to deal with. One is the desktop and another one is the mobile. This is the real part. I mean, this is how the applications are implemented in the real world. Unfortunately, I am doing it every single day, so I can tell you that for sure, like this is what we do. So generally, when we are thinking about sharing the data amongst multiple different applications like desktop, website, and mobile native applications, this is the standard architecture we follow all the time. So whenever you think about this, I have a desktop device here, which I'm going to use for browsing the website, and there are two mobile devices. I'm talking about only two because there are two predominant operating systems out there. What am I saying here is this. This is a kind of a desktop, and both of them are mobile. It can be any operating system there, doesn't matter. Ultimately, we are looking at the browser side. When you look at them, there is a predominant iOS right there, and probably the other one, which is predominant in the market, is nothing but an Android. So if you ask if you ask anyone these days, like which device you are having right now, some might say Android, some might say iOS, some might say both of them. Most of them are going to use either one of them or both of them. I mean, there are other devices as well. I can give a list of 15 such operating systems there, which is not required in this context. That's the reason I'm restricting myself to only two of them. So probably I have a kind of a client here, which is kind of split into two parts, the desktop part as well as the mobile part. So this is what I'm going to do now. So this is a desktop, this is a Android, or this is an iOS mobile, which is going to represent a kind of a client side. So this is my client. You know, this client is having a desktop component within it, and there is an iOS or Android application which is going to do the same job on the client side. Okay. Now, generally, when you deal with this, or generally when you write the code like this, let us see what exactly is needed and how exactly is implemented in the real world. Now, see this. Whenever you want to store the data in the database, or whenever you are going to get the data from the database, imagine that you are opening a website like Amazon.com, or imagine the application Amazon.com you are opening on, let's say, iOS and Android somewhere here. You see that still we are talking, or we are getting the same data in both the contexts. So is it like it is going to talk to the database directly like that? Of course not. This is not the way it does the job. So what does it do behind the scene? The behind the scene, it does something like this. Behind the scene, it adds a another layer here, you know. So it creates a separate layer, and this layer is going to make the web application and the mobile application kind of more database. I'm sorry, a kind of a database sharing application. So both of them will share the database here, you know. So this application, it's what we are going to develop now, is called as a middleware. This is called as a middleware. I'll say middleware in this way, middleware. Now, why it's called as a middleware? It's called as a middleware because it sits in the middle between the database and the client. Database is nothing but a kind of server you can think of, and the client is nothing but a client where the data will be displayed to the user. The data will be shown to the user. So basically, when you talk about the real world, the one which is faces towards the client is generally called as the front end, or generally called as the client side, you know. So this part here, when I say client, it's also called as the front end. Remember this word. I mean, it's not necessary that you have to remember every single thing here, but again, it's just a kind of, you know, the extra knowledge you are having right now. This is called as a front end, and this is generally called as a backend. A backend is something which you don't see, and this front end is the one which is made for you. You, in the sense, user. So whenever you talk about the Amazon's website or Amazon's mobile applications, both of them are front end. I'm sorry, not front end. It's a front end. It's my bad. It's a front end. So whenever you talk about these front end, front means it's kind of representing the user, or it's kind of made for user. So the front end is going to get loaded or going to get used by the user. So it's called as a front end. And this is the back end. The back end sits between the database and the front end. That's the reason why it's also called as middleware. Now, how do you develop these applications, middleware applications? Again, you can use one of the languages which I mentioned earlier. You can use Python, you can use PHP, you can use Perl, Java, whatever you are looking for. Of course, we are going to use Python. So this is how we are going to develop a Python application, which will be of a type called as a middleware. So this is the middleware which is going to do the job here. Okay. Okay. So no problem. Yeah, you can go, Shubham, not a big deal. So right now we are going to say that this is the middleware, and this is what we are going to develop now. So to develop this application, you need to know few things here. I want to share the data amongst my desktop and the mobile applications. And to do this, you see, I'm going to make that database connection like what we did last time from our Python application. This part we already have talked about last time. We already have created a database application last time. We already have performed all of the queries like CRUD, that's CRUD operations. We already have done that last time, you know. So because we already have done that last time, I want to continue further, and I want to say like, how can I take an advantage of these queries, and how can I send this data towards both desktop application and a mobile application? To do this, we are going to develop this application called as a Python. And in Python, if I want to do this, I'm going to use a package called as a Flask. So this is the Flask package. So the Flask package is the one which is going to make my Python application a kind of a middleware type of application, or it is going to make my application as a REST server. This is also called as the REST. REST stands for representational state transfer. Now, what is a REST? A REST is a kind of a design pattern with which we are going to make our database accessible to both desktop as well as mobile application, or whoever wants to access a database in the form of JSON. What do you mean by that? I'm going to tell you that in a second, but this is how the things will be implemented. Now, these, the application which is going to sit here, or the application which is going to make the database accessible to the rest of the world, is generally called as a middleware. It's also called as a REST server, and it provides different APIs. API stands for Application Programming Interface, with which we can consume all these databases, all the database related details, or whatever you want to do with the server. So probably this is how it is going to talk to the server, not directly by connecting to the database, but by talking to the middleware portion here. So you see here, this is the kind of a client, this is the kind of a middleware, and let's say this is the kind of a database. So database is somewhere there, and I want to connect to database and share the database amongst the desktop and the iOS channel. So how do I do this? To do this, this is how we are going to send the request, and we are going to get the response. See, again, we are going to send a request from here, like what I said last time. Browser was doing this for us. This time we are going to do it programmatically, or we are going to do it by using a Python code, or by using an HTML or JavaScript code. So this is the client which is going to send the request, and that request will be processed by your web server, which is going to get implemented in Python, which internally will go to the database and get the data. But how do I do this? See, I want to perform those 4 operations. Imagine that there is a desktop application like Amazon where I want to see the list of products. I know there is a table called as a product somewhere in the database, and I want to fetch the number of products there, and I want to display the list of products in my desktop as well as in my mobile application, which means there has to be some way to just get the list of products from my database. So how do I do that? How do I ask my middleware to send me the list of products? Remember, last time we talked about those 4 operations. So if I want to get the list of products, that means I'm kind of looking for one of the CRUD operations. When I say CRUD, this is what we have seen last time, CRUD, C for create. So that's what I want to create a new object here. Sometimes R for read. I want to read the data from database. U means update. I want to edit or update existing data. And sometimes it's also required to delete the existing data as well. So this is what I'm looking for. This is the kind of operation I want to perform. Now, when you want to perform one of the operations, you have to use a kind of HTTP method here. Remember last time what I said? When browser was sending that request, browser used a method which is kind of a get, which is by default. So browser by default uses the method get, but not necessary now, because it's not the browser who's going to do that. It's the client-side program which is going to send these requests. So how do we send this request? I'll show a couple of demos there, but right now just remember that whenever I want to create a record on the database, maybe I want to create a new product, for example, I want my user to get registered, meaning I have to create a new record for a user. It can be done by setting the HTTP method to something called as a post. So this is called as a post method. If I want to get the data from the database or from the server, I have to specify the type is equals to get. For update, I'll have to specify the type is equals to put, and for delete, we'll have to specify the type is equals to delete. As simple as that. So when you talk about these methods, there is a get, there is a put, there is a delete, and there is a post. All of them are meant to do something different. Now, when I say they meant to do something different, in the case, like if you are going for, let's say a create is going to get created by using a type or by using a method called as a post. So post method is going to create a record. Let's say read method is going to get the records, while delete method is going to delete an existing record on the database side. So whenever you are creating that request, last time browser was creating that request on behalf of me. Now we are going to create that request ourselves. How do we do that? I'm going to show you that, don't worry. But this is what we are going to do now. So a request will contain, let's say, HTTP method based on your requirement. Let's say if I want to perform a create operation, let's say I'm getting input from user and I want to create a new record for a product or for a user, then we'll specify the HTTP method as a post. When we want to get the records, maybe get all the records, like maybe get all the products, or maybe if I want to get the user's profile. So whatever you want to get from the server, we'll have to specify a get method there. When, let's say, user wants to update his profile, or when I want to update the price for a particular product. So in that case, we'll have to specify the HTTP method as a put. And let's say because there is a product which is discontinued and I want to delete it from my database as well. So this operation can be performed by using HTTP method called as a delete. In short, whenever we want to perform any of the operation here, we have to specify HTTP method, and then we'll have to create the HTTP request out of it. So I'll have to create a HTTP request, which will have one of the HTTP methods there. And along with it, we have to specify which table I want to specify here. Generally, this can be done by using a URL. URL is something which I mentioned earlier. It's called as a path as well. So for example, I'll mention path instead of saying URL. So this is nothing but the path, which in my case can be /product or can be /user, depending again on what operation you want to perform. I'll give an example, see if you can understand. So probably in my request, I'm going to have one of those two things. It can be something like a path and not one of them. It has to have both of them. One of them is like a HTTP method, and the other one is kind of a path. Let's say I'm having a HTTP method as a post, and path is slash product. That means I want to post a product, means I want to create a product. If I say path is slash user, and if I say put, means I want to update a user. When I say path is product, and when I say method is delete, that means I want to delete an existing product. So that's how we will understand what type of method and what type of path we have to set in that request. So basically, this is again a request response pattern. We are sending a request. This is the request here. We are going to send an HTTP request to the server. The middleware here is nothing but the server we are going to develop, and that server will receive the request. See, when the server receives the request, one of the important jobs of a server is to understand what is written there and act accordingly. So let's imagine that we are sending a request with path slash product and a method get. Now, what do you mean by get? Get means I want to get the number of maybe number of rows in that particular table. Which table? Because path is equals to slash product, it triggers, or it tells me that it means I'm looking for the list of products there. So whenever, being the server, if I receive this request which contains the HTTP method, and if I want to perform an operation, let us see how this mapping can be done. So this is a kind of the kind of a mapping which will tell me like what needs to be done here. This is HTTP method. I'm just going to say that it's a method now. So this can be a get, this can be a post, this can be a kind of a put, and this can be a kind of a delete. So again, depending on what you have seen from the client side, we will get one of them here. Let's imagine that we have gotten a request where the HTTP method is set as get. What do you mean by get? Get means a client is looking for the data. If the client is looking for the data, I'll have to get the data from the database. So I'm going to perform an operation, something like a select star from. Select star from and blah, blah, blah. So literally blah, blah, blah. So it depends again which path you have used. If you're using slash product, for example, that's a path, then I'll understand, client is looking for a product. So I'll say select star from product. Let's say if a client says a slash post slash product, and the method is equals to post. Post means I want to create it. To create, I'll perform insert into operation. So to create a new data, we'll have to perform insert into. To get the number of records, we'll have to perform a select operation. To update an existing data, we'll have to perform that update query. And I hope you still can recall, I already have shown you how to perform those queries earlier in Python by using MySQL package, MySQL connector package, precisely. Finally, if I want to delete something, I'll simply go back and say delete from table, and probably this is how I will delete my records. So what we are doing here is like we are simply saying if I want to perform those database operations for both mobile as well as desktop world, this is a kind of arrangement we are going to have. The arrangement will be in terms of request and response pattern. This is a kind of a request we have sent, and this is a kind of a request processing we are going to perform on the server side. So on the server side, whenever we are going to receive that request, the request will be digested by our server application, and the digested request will get processed with one of the operations there. Most of the times we are going to deal with the databases. That's the reason why I'm showing you this particular example here. So this is the method, and this is the corresponding operation that we have to perform using Python application. How do I perform using Python application is what we already have seen last time. Now we just have to map that method here. So it can be a get, then we'll have to perform a select operation. If it is a kind of a post, then it has to be an insert operation, and so on and so forth. So this is a kind of a mapping that will tell you like what operation or which operation we have to perform in which scenario. If it is a get, it has to be select. If it is a post, it has to be insert, so on and so forth. All these operations, see, middleware will receive a request. Middleware will perform one of the operations on the database. Again, depending on which request you have sent, it is going to perform that operation. And this operation, whichever is going to return the result, will have to get returned from the server. So what server is going to do here? Server is going to create a kind of a response, and that response will be sent back to the client. So this is called as HTTP response, the one which I showed you earlier. So this is the HTTP response. So here on the left hand side, we are going to send a HTTP request. Let me just grab it and put it in this way. So this is the request. The request will be created by a client, whoever wants to look for the data. The HTTP request will get sent to the server. The server will understand what needs to be done based on two things, the method and the path. And based on that, it is going to do the job, like select star from, if it is a get method, and if the path is slash product, it is going to say select star from product. If it is, let's say, put user, that means user wants to update the profile. So behind the scene, we are going to perform an operation like update user, so on and so forth. Okay, so I hope you can understand, whenever a client wants to get the data from the database, client will send a request and server will process it and server will send a response. So this is the request response pattern. When you say the request and response is the pattern, both of them have to have a kind of a unique interface to talk to each other. So what does it, I mean, what does it do behind the scene then? It uses it, in a sense, the desktop or maybe the mobile application, whoever wants to get the data, they use a kind of a JSON structure in order to talk to each other. So JSON or something like an XML. Earlier there was XML, but nowadays JSON is the one which is kind of replaced that XML, and that's the reason the communication between the client and the server, or a client and the middleware, will be done by using something like a JSON format. I hope you can understand what is going on and how the data will get exchanged between the database and maybe the client applications here. So no matter which applications we are looking at these days, it can be Flipkart, it can be Amazon, it can be Netflix, it can be any damn thing there. All of them are using exactly same scenario. Watch this one more time. I'm going to tell you one more thing, which is kind of will kind of reveal a couple of other things as well. Let's say this is a kind of, I'm sorry, let's go for this one. Let's say this is my first part. This is the database, for example. Okay, this is the another one where we are having a kind of a connector between the database and the desktop client, or maybe the mobile client. And this is the last portion of it, last piece of the puzzle. So probably I'll say this is my first part. Maybe I'll use a color like white here, for example. So this is my first part here. This is my second part. And probably this is my third part here. So basically, whenever you're talking about this particular diagram, you will see that there are 3 tiers in this, 3 tiers, or you can say 3 layers in this diagram. One is called as a database tier or database layer. Second one is a middleware tier or middleware layer. And the third one is something like a client tier or the client layer. And that's the reason why this is generally called as a 3-tier application or 3-tier architecture. So in this 3-tier architecture, 3-layered architecture, you can see there is a database layer, there is a client layer, and in between, the one which sits, it's called as a middleware layer. So basically, our job as a Python developer is to develop a middleware application, because this can be developed by using Python. This can be anything. It can be a native application like mobile, or native applications like desktop, or website application like HTML, JS, and CSS kind of programming. So depending again on your requirement, you can use any of the language there. Just to make this diagram complete, I'll say HTML plus CSS and the JavaScript on this side, on the desktop side. If you're on iOS, it can be something like a Swift or Objective-C, OBJ-C or Swift. It's on the Swift on the iPhone side. And on the Android side, it can be a Java or Kotlin. So this is how we generally develop the client side, and those client side applications talk to the database through one of the middleware. So middleware can be developed by using Python. If you're using Python, then the package we are going to use here is the Flask, or you can use a Node.js application, can be used, developed by using something called as an Express, or it can be something else. So it depends actually, whatever application type or whatever programming language you are using there. So whenever you talk about this diagram, you can understand like how the database and the client, both of them are kind of talking to each other. They talk to each other by using a layer called as middleware. The middleware layer is also called as a REST server, and the REST server is going to give us the APIs. Those APIs will be used by or consumed by the client in order to get the data, exchange the data there. So this pattern where we are using different methods for performing different type of operations by sending a request and getting the response by communicating, having a communication channel in terms of JSON or XML. This entire design pattern is called as a REST design pattern. REST stands for representational state transfer. It is the pattern in which we are having the methods post, get, put, and delete used to perform these operations like create, read, update, and delete. So this pattern, what you see here, is called as a REST pattern, or it's called as a REST APIs, or it's also called as a REST web services. Many names having the same concept today. So this is a kind of application we are going to develop now. Of course, our focus will not be on the client side. We are going to use an application called as a Postman to do it, but more or less, we are going to focus on this part in the sense on the Python part, okay? So we'll see how it can be done. But before I say anything, before I show you anything, I want to get the confirmation from your side. Did you understand the whole concept here? All of you, can you please confirm? Have you understood the whole concept here? Right? Good. So this is a kind of a REST application, and of course, and it doesn't matter whether it's a Python or anything else, any other language you're going to use. The concept is going to still remain same. Whenever you hear the word REST, just keep this diagram in front of you and just try to answer any of the questions. So the REST talks about this particular diagram. So this is a diagram which tells you like how the architecture is implemented and how the tiers are kind of separated in this layer. Okay. Okay, so probably this is how we are kind of doing the job. A client is sending a request, the middleware is going to accept the request, and probably middleware is going to perform one of the jobs there, and that job will generate the output which will be sent to the client in the form of HTTP response by using JSON. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. Okay. What is an API? API is the way, I'll show you what is an API and how it can be consumed. So just wait for it, Pranit, and you will see that practically what do you mean by it. Okay, now coming back to the PyCharm, we haven't written a single line of code today, so let's start doing it. Probably you will understand what exactly it is when we start implementing it. The very first requirement is like you have to install that package. You know how to install a package now. So go back to your terminal somewhere here or somewhere on your terminal or command prompt if you're on Windows, and use the same command. If it is Windows, if it is Linux or Mac, use sudo. If it is Windows, you don't have to say sudo. Simply say pip3 install Flask. I mean, if you already have installed it, well and good. If it is not, then you have to install it, because without this package, you cannot run this application. You cannot create that server application here. You know. So on my machine, it seems like the package is already installed. On my machine, I think I didn't mention that here. Did I? It's not required. Let's leave it. I don't care about that. So it's already been installed on my machine. So probably on your machine also it has to be installed. If it is not, just get it installed quickly. And now we'll start writing the program and we'll see how different it is than what we have developed so far. Okay. Let us see how to start developing our first application, which is going to be considered as a REST client, REST server or a web server or a kind of a middleware. There are many names out there. You decide which one you want to call it as. Okay, so to start with this, we'll have to use a Flask package. I mean, we just have installed that Flask package here. Now we want to start using it. So how do I do that? To do this, we'll have to start using the Flask. Now, Flask is the package and which provides a class called as a Flask. So probably what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say from Flask. In a sense, the Flask is nothing but the application I want to use. The package I want to use, that's Flask. I'll have to import a class called as a Flask. So this is what we are going to start with. So this is the Flask, which is the package, you know, and this F capital Flask is the one which is going to give me a kind of a web server, you know. So this Flask with F capital is a class we are going to create an object of, and then we will start using it there. Okay, so let us see how it can be done. This is where we are going to import the Flask package, import Flask package. You know what you mean by that? I'm just telling you like this is how we are going to do it. This is the first step. The second step is where we want to create the web server or instantiate the web server, whatever you can say. Create a web server. How do I do that? To do this, I want to create an object of this Flask. Now, when you are creating an object of this Flask, it has to know like what exactly the name of the module which is going to create the Flask server. I hope you still can recall the modules and packages, and there I already have mentioned like __name __ will give me the current module name, which is most of the time __ main __. So we are going to create a new web server by saying app equals to Flask, Flask, something like an app or something like a name, under name. Now, as I said earlier, if you look at this diagram, the diagram will tell you that the web server here, in my case, the Flask application which I'm developing right now, it is a web server which is going to listen on a particular port. So probably I'm going to say that this application is going to listen on port number 5000. For example, you may change that as per your requirement, but this is going to listen on a specific port number. And this port number will be used in that URL, the one which I'm going to write on the client side. Let's see how it can be done. Okay. PyCharm is alerting to use the enterprise when you use a Flask module. No, it's not. It should not. Mine is also community edition. Preeti, you must have done something wrong. It's better you can just use the command prompt provided by your operating system and get it installed there. Okay. But otherwise, you don't need an enterprise edition for running a Flask application. Okay. I mean, it doesn't require it, and don't use the enterprise, because for enterprise, you'll have to pay for it. Okay. Okay, so now I see a package has been imported, a server has been created. Now I want to start that server listening on a port number, let's say 5000. So how do I do this? This is the last step in it. I'll say start the server. Start the server means start the server on port number 5000. By default, it uses a port number 5000, but anyways, I'm going to mention it here. So how do I do that? To do this, I'm going to say app.run. Run is the way we are going to run the application server. And here we are going to say, where do I want to run it? I want to run it on the local host. The local host can be specified by using something like a 0.0.0.0. You can skip it. By default, it will run on the local host, but it will be not possible for you to reach to that server over the network. So if you want to do it, it's better you can say that listen on port number 0.0.0.0. So right now, say that this is where I want to listen listen to the incoming request. And of course, we have to specify the port number as well. If you do not specify the port number, by default it is 5000. But anyways, I will start it on the 5000 itself. So let us see whether we can do it. Maybe if 5000 doesn't work, I'll go for a different port. But here you can change that port. Or let's say I'm going to change the port number to 4000. I know there is some program which is running on 5000 on my machine, so I don't want to take that risk. Better we just go for port number 4000. Let's see whether we can start the server and whether we can get something out of the server. Let's do this. I'm going to run this code right now. That's it. That's the simplest code we are starting here. So when I run this application, watch what happens. This application, when it starts, it says server Flask page 1. That's lazy loading. Leave it. Environment is production because we did not specify the debugging flag there. That's why it's saying the environment is production. Debugging mode is off. It's okay. And this is running on 0.0.0.0:4000. Press Ctrl C to quit. Oh, that simply means the program is still running and the program will continuously run. Why will it run continuously? I hope if you look at this diagram, you can understand what I'm talking about. This program has to run continuously to listen on port number, whatever, let's say port number 4000, 5000, whatever it is, in which case, whenever a client sends a request, it has to be present in order to respond client back, so that program will run continuously. Don't quit this. Don't say Control C here. Otherwise, you will not be able to reach to that server. So it will run 24/7. Absolutely right, to respond to your client. And that's why we generally call it as a server. Server means it is going to run continuously 24/7 without getting it interrupted. So probably let's assume that this is the one which is going to run continuously in the behind, maybe in the background. So don't press Ctrl C here. Let it run in the background. And now I want to reach to that server. How do I do that? So if I go back to the diagram here, this one is already started on port number 4000. Let me change that port number 5000 to 4000 because our server is started on port number 4000. Maybe port number 4000, that's fine. And it shows me the IP address of 0.0.0.0 means it's a local host. So I can reach to this server. I can reach, in a sense, I can send that request to that server by opening the client, which is the best client. I think browser is one of the best clients. So I can come back here and say, hey, I want to reach to the same machine. Same machine means it's a local host. I know my program is listening on port number 4000. So I'm going to say port number 4000 is the one where my server is listening to. And when I press enter, oh, it says not found. I mean, when I go back to the localhost 4000, I'm supposed to get something out of my server, but it's not giving me anything. Why? There is a reason. I'll talk about that reason in a minute. But let me go back here and I'll show you something. Do you see something here? It tells me that someone from your machine or someone from anywhere has sent a request, which is having a method equals to get, the URL equals to slash. It uses a port number, it uses the protocol HTTP 1.1 specification. And because me in the sense my my server program being a server, I have not sent anything back. That's a reason. I don't have anything to send back here. That's the reason why I'm sending 404. Oh, do you remember 404? 404 means it's not found. So basically, someone has sent a request to the server. Server has not configured to return anything in that context. That's the reason server said, hey, what you're looking for, I don't have it. It's not found on my server, on my machine. So I'm going to send back as the 404. 404 means server file not found. And that's the reason why you are getting this message saying not found. Not found means the one you are looking for is not available on the server. Then how can I make it available? To make this available, now see here, I'm going to stop my server. Control C to stop the server. Or maybe you have a button here. So whatever you can say. So when you stop your server, nothing is going to work. So probably if I just go back and say refresh, you see now it's going to say that, oh, this server cannot be reached because my server stopped working. Now, before I start the server in this context, or before I start server in this program, I want my server machine to respond back if someone is sending a request with the path equals to slash. How do I do that? To do this, I'm going to say, let the server respond for a request sent with path equals to slash. So if someone is sending this request, localhost colon 4000, we did not mention anything after this. So by default, it is something like a slash. So for slash, I want my server to respond. How do I do this? To do this, first create a function. So this is my function. I will say this is the root function. Function name doesn't matter because simply put, this function is going to simply tell you that this is the name of the function which is going to get executed, which will return the slash, which will return the response for that root. It can be anything. I'm going to say something like a get root or welcome page, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Conventionally, this is the root. Root means you are going for the root of or slash of your page, slash of your website. So that's the reason why conventionally we use that function name as a root. For now, I'm going to say return welcome to the page or welcome to the server. Why page? Welcome to the REST server. So that's what I'm going to do now here. Now, whenever you are saying something like this, I want my server to respond back to the incoming request. Let's imagine this from the diagram here. Someone like a browser on the desktop has sent a request. The request is with method equals to get and the URL is equals to slash. So I want my middleware program, my Flask program to understand the request and send the response whenever the path is a slash. Listen to me very carefully. When the path is a slash and the method is equals to get, because my browser is going to use the method get. So how do I do it then? To do it, we have to say @app, the object we have created here. And inside this, I'm going to say, I'm going to create a route. This is called as a route. Few people pronounce it as a route as well. It depends on which country you are coming from. So I'm going to say app.route. And right here, I'm going to say, this is going to map with a path slash, which will be executed in the context of methods equals to get, So basically what I'm trying to say here is, whenever the request contains something like a method get, I want my user to see this message, welcome to the REST server. I hope you can still recall, once upon a time, we have seen something like a @ symbol. And I hope I talked about this earlier in little bit, not little bit, and rather in a great depth last time. I hope you can still recall. Someone is saying it's called as a decorator. Absolutely, yes. And if you can recall, I mentioned that at the same time, like if you want to understand Flask, you have to understand decorator, because unless you know decorator, what they do, you will not be able to understand what this code is. So behind the scene, the application, which is an object we have created here, is going to call its own methods first, and then it will call your method to return what you want to return to the user. Guess what? We are done. This is the very simple part. I'm going to say run right now. You see my application has started successfully on port number 4000. Now I'm going to go back to my browser. This time I'm simply saying refresh. Watch what happens. On a count of three, I'm going to say refresh. 3, 2, 1, refresh. And boom, this time, instead of getting a message like, hey, not found, I got a something like, welcome to the REST server. My God, did you see that? So probably whenever we are sending a request, whenever we, in the sense the browser is sending a request to the middleware understood that, oh, the request is coming with path slash and the method get. It has executed this function, and whatever the function is returning, it has returned back to the client in the form of HTTP response. Of course, this is something I mentioned theoretically earlier. This is the practical implementation of it. This is my server, and where is it? This is my client, you know. In Mahabharata, there is a dialogue, Ha Surya, Ha Jayadratha. So in simply put, this is my client, this is my server. Both of them are communicating with the pattern of request response. And if you don't believe me, let me go back to the same development tools again. Let me go back to the network part. If I say refresh, I'll see that this is the request, which contains a request header, like the host, the path, and all of these things, whatever we have mentioned last time. And boom, I got the response back with something like a status code as 200 here. You see, the method is equals to get, the URL equals to this. Look, that slash is right there. So all of these things, whatever we have discussed maybe earlier through these two diagrams, they now come to life. So basically, whenever we are doing something like this in the real world, behind the scene, these two things happen. I mean, it creates a request. The request gets processed by the server sends a response, the response gets processed by the client, and the client shows the output to the user. That's it. This is the way we are kind of doing the job. Guys, first confirm, have you understood what are we doing here? Sure about that? Okay, so this is what is happening behind the scene. Now, a quick question. Now, let's imagine that maybe on my browser, I want to get the list of let's say list of products, because we happen to have that product table. And if I'm not mistaken, we have already some products in my product table. So if I just go back here and say, oh, there is nothing, fine. Let's insert something. Let me say, describe my table, describe product. There are 4 columns. So I'm going to say insert into product. Let's say title. This is what I want to insert. Description, then the price, and the values are title is equals to product 1. Let's say, the hell. Okay, leave it. So product 1, description is, let's say description 1. Who cares again? And the price is equals to 100. So what the hell? Insert into product, title, description, this, values, blah blah blah. Field doesn't have a default value. Did we not pass the value? What the hell is saying? Did I not create this as an increment? I shouldn't. Product is something we have created right now, right? Oh my God. Let me drop this table. It's my bad. I should have said auto incremented. Otherwise, sorry, drop table, drop product. What the hell, drop table product. And probably if I already have that create statement somewhere, I think I forgot to mention auto increment. Otherwise, I'll have to specify the ID all the time. I don't want to. So I'm going to say auto increment. That will make my job a little bit simpler. I'm going to insert this record right now, and we'll say that select star from product. You know what? I want to get those products from the database, and I want to send that to the user. Let's see how it can be done. So to do this, probably I'm going to come back and start sending the list of products on the URL where I want to see /product. So this is what I want to see. See, right now it is telling me not found. I can understand that. Not found simply means it's not yet implemented. That's fine. Now someone is sending some error here. Let me see what that error is all about. What are you getting here? This is not error. Who's that? Shripati, this is not the error. This is what it is telling you, that everything is looking great. Great in a sense, everything is looking fine. This is not an error at all. So probably you have to let this application run. You see it's running right here on my machine as well. That simply means your server has been started successfully. Okay, so this is not an error, Shripati. This is a kind of confirmation from the flash side of it that server started successfully on port number 4000. So whenever you want to reach that server, this is how you can go to the browser. You can use that URL and you can reach that server. Okay. Okay. Now what I'm going to do here is I'll stop this server and then we'll recreate that application by supporting the slash product. Last time the slash product was not supported. Let's see how it can be done. Browser is not getting the output. Are you on Windows? Maybe somewhere the firewall is coming into picture and try to block that. Check your Defender settings and other things and see if it is giving you the output. Okay. Otherwise, I'm going to show you that in a second. Like install an application called as a Postman. Anyways, we need that. So install this application. It's very small application. Register yourself. It's free of cost, and I'll show you how that Postman can be used to perform a kind of a request response pattern with the help of your server there. Okay. If you're already having it, well and good. Otherwise, those who are not having it, just go here, register yourself. It's free of cost and download this application. So sign up and then download. I already have installed on my machine because without this application, we'll not be able to test all the different APIs. APIs developed by our server application. You know. So if I want to go for that something like a post, put, delete, and all of these methods here, we have to have that Postman application. It can be a Postman or it can be something like a REST client or whatever it is, but you need to have a program like this. We don't need that. So probably this is how we are going to use that we are going to use that program called as a Postman. So Shripati, I think it's better you can just download this program and I'll show you that how to use it in a minute. Okay. So by the time, let us go back on the server side, in a sense on the program side, and let us write one more page. This is my second page, kind of a page 2, where we want to create the second server. See, how do I create a server? To create a server, we are going to start with the same stuff, like from Flask, import Flask. That's it. Next, we'll have to create a Flask application by saying application is equals to Flask __ name __. Next, we'll have to start application on port number something. So I'll say the host is 0.0.0.0, and the port number, if you don't specify, it's by default 4000. I want to run it on the 4000, you know. So whenever someone hits my URL without specifying the path, I want to return welcome message, which can be done by saying something like a root. Right here, I'm going to say return welcome to my maybe web server, whatever. So this is what I want to say. If I want this function to be called in case when I receive a request with path is equals to / and the method is equals to get, I'm going to say app.route. This is called as a route, where the path is / and the method could be something like get. So this is called as a get method. It's not method, it's method. So you can specify one function for most of the or all of the methods as well. So you can configure it for get, post, put, and delete. For one single function can be mapped to that. Anyways, we need only for get this time. Let me run this application. Now what happens here is when you run this application and if you make some changes, we have to stop this application, literally stop this application and start again. And we generally forget this. And that's the reason sometimes though the code is there, the application doesn't work for you. And maybe in that case, you understand that or you get it like the application is not working at all. So the best option while you are developing the application, pass another flag called as a debug equals to true. Now, when you say debug equals to true, whenever you make changes to your program, your server will automatically restart. We don't have to restart it manually. So when I say run, check what it says. The environment is production, it's okay. But it says the debugging is on. Now it says restarting with stat. Whatever you do here, for example, if I press enter and if I say save, you see that it by default restarting the server. So I don't have to restart it manually. It will automatically get restarted automatically whenever I save my changes. So that's a benefit of having this debug equals to true. So having it there will save my efforts to restart my server all the time I make the changes. You know, so that's the reason why I'm going to do it. Let me go back to my browser for again one more time. It's not the product available yet, but at least I can see the welcome to my web server here. Now, before I go to the products, I want to show you something else as well. This is showing welcome to my web server in a very plain text. I want to make it a little bit bold. So those who know website development, they can also come back here and put whatever tag you are looking for. So probably if I say H1 here, and if I say refresh, you see now it's a little bit bold. Again, you don't have to learn HTML for that. You don't have to learn CSS for that, because this is not our job. This is the job of a front-end developer. We are kind of working on the back-end side, and we are going to be a back-end developer if you are developing Python in the website development. So maybe if I just want, I can add a style where I can change the color. I'm sorry, where I can change the color. I can do it in this way better. So I can use a double quote in between, and I can say the color is equals to red. So instead of getting it in a black color, now I'll get it in a red color, so on and so forth. You decide what needs to be done and how needs to be done, and all of these decorations will be added here. This is a part of CSS. Again, something that we don't have to bother about right now. More important for me is the next part. So this is where I'm going to write a function to get the products. As simple as that. Get products. Get products means I really want to get the products from the database. So how do I do that? I hope you still recall, to get the products from the database, we have to import MySQL connector. So I'm going to say import MySQL connector. And again, the code we have written last time, I hope you can still recall. So probably if I want to go to the database, get the data from database and close the database, the code will look like this. Maybe I'll say connection, which is equals to mysql.connector.connect, which is going to have host is equals to localhost. Maybe the user is going to be root for me. Password is again a kind of password. I'm sorry, root for me. And the database I want to connect, database. I think it's persons.db. Exactly. That's it. Before I forget, I want to say connection.close, and I'll write the next piece of code in between these two segments. You know that whenever you want to execute a query, we have to first write that query saying, hey, I want to select, let's say ID, title, description, and the price. This is the price, description, price from the table product. I want to execute it. How do I? To execute this, we'll have to say something like, we'll have to get the cursor by saying cursor is equals to connection.cursor. I hope you still can recall. We already have seen this earlier. And then we'll have to say cursor.execute query. You know what? Once the data is available, I can get that by saying products. This is nothing but or maybe I'll say the result, because that's the one we have used last time. So I'll say result is equals to cursor.fetch all. I hope you still recall this code. We already have written this quite a few times last time. And probably, yeah, this is, Vishal, it's not showing you in the red because you did not restart the application. Just go back here, stop this, or restart this. So that will solve your problem. That's the reason why I said use a debug equals to true. So whenever you make the changes, it will automatically reload it for you. Anyways, this is the result. And what I'm going to do here is, once the connection is closed, I'm going to return the result directly from here. Last time I returned a single string. This time I'm going to return a kind of, maybe a list of tuples. I hope you still can recall. This is nothing but the list of tuples. Let me put that result here. I want this function to be called when I send, or when my client sends a request, with method equals to get and the URL is equals to /product. So how do I do this then? To do this, again, we'll have to use a decorator, app.route. Right inside this is a /product. That's the one we have used last. That's the one we are kind of thinking to use. And then we will say the methods are, right now the method is only get, but later on you can use it for multiple methods as well. That's it. Now, what I showed you in the diagram is what is going to happen now. So my browser, which is a client, is going to send a request. The request will be having HTTP method get, and the URL will be /product. This request will be received by my server. My server will see that, oh, it's /product, method is equals to get, and it will automatically call my function. This function will literally connect to the database, and will execute this query, select star from. Whatever the response we are getting here, we are getting that inside the result of a variable, and then we are going to send it back to the client by saying return the result. whatever you are going to returning from here, I mean, whatever you return from here, that will get sent to the client. So that is how the entire diagram is maybe is practically implemented here. Let us see if that works, because that's more important. Instead of using web browser now, because it's just going to give me the list of products, so I'm going to use this browser, something called as a postman here. I mean, you can use browser for now for get result, but it's better you can use the postman here. So to use the postman, you can click on this button here, plus, and you can say the method here. There are many options available. We already have talked about get, post, put, and delete. So later on, whenever you want to deal with those methods, you can select one of them here. Right now, it's the get I want to use. So what is the URL? The URL is http://localhost 4000, because this is where I want my server to return the list of products, not slash, but only 4000 will give me the message, welcome to my web server. I can click on preview and I can see the same output which I was getting in the browser. So that's exactly what my browser was doing behind the scene. Now it's not the slash product I'm looking for, because I'm looking for the list of products, you know, so we'll have to use the URL with slash product. So when I send this URL, probably you can understand, oh my God, it gives me an error. It gives me an error saying, it's not possible. It seems like my server is crashed. And of course, I'm expecting it to crash right now. So I got the result here. You see that I got the result here, but while sending the data, it has crashed. See, the response is 500. You can see that on the postman right here. This is 500. 500 means internal server error. I guess I mentioned that last time when I was talking about that diagram. So when you say 500, 500 means internal server error. The program I'm writing here is a server program. And if there is some problem in my program, that means it's an internal server error. So that's what is getting returned to my client. But why did it not work? I mean, it should have given me the list of products, right? So I already have got the products here, but why is it not working there? It's not working there because if you look at the message on the bottom side, it says the view function did not return a valid response. The return type, read this statement, the return type must be a string, a dictionary, or a tuple, or a response instance, or WSGI callable, but it was a list. Now I got it. It is expecting either a string or a dictionary or a tuple, or maybe kind of a response instance. It can be a JSON as well. It should not be a list, but you know what? We started returning result as we are getting it from the database, and database has returned a kind of a list of tuples, and that's the reason why my application crashed. Oh, that's not a JSON, that's why it's not working, you know. That's not a JSON, that's why it's not working. You remember in the diagram I talked about sending the result in terms of JSON or XML. So here I'm going to use a JSON. How do I do this? To do this, I'm going to come back to my line number 1 and say from Flask import Flask. Along with that, import a function called as a JSONify. JSONify means convert the structure into JSON format. So how do I do this? Very simple. Instead of saying return result, we can simply call the function JSONify and pass the result to that JSONify function. That's it. All we have to do here is we just have to return that result in terms of JSON. My program automatically restarted because I saved my changes. Guess what? If I come back here and send the response, boom, I got my result. This is a list of lists. Tuple is nothing but a kind of array. So it is saying it's a list of arrays. It's very difficult for me to process this kind of data on the client side, and that's why it's not a good sign to return the data like this. So how do I format this data then? How do I make sure that the data is kind of readable? This is not a good sign of returning the data. So what should I do? I should convert every tuple into a dictionary, because every value should have an associated key with it. I don't know what one is. I mean, look at from the client side. Whoever is going to receive that response will not understand what one means, or product one means, or description one means, or 100 rupees means, or 100.0 means. So to understand that this is not the quantity, this is the price, this is the description, this is the title, and this is an ID, I want to associate a key with every single value. I hope you understand what I'm talking about. Instead of printing the result like this, I want to process that result. How do I process the result? I know this is the list of tuples, and because the tuple is going to have an ID, title, description, and the price like this, let's run the run the for loop on top of that result. You will understand this code only if you already have done the practice on MySQL communication. I already have talked about this earlier as well. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a products as a list here, products as a temporary or empty list here, and I will convert this tuple into a dictionary and will put that inside the products. Meaning what I'm saying here is product, which is equals to, I'm creating a dictionary out of it by saying ID is equals to ID, by saying title is equals to title, by saying description is equals to description, and finally price is equals to price. I hope you can understand we are getting the values here: ID, title, description, and the price, and then we are associating a key with them, key with all of these values. And now I'll say add the product into the products by saying products dot append product. We are now having the list of dictionaries. So this is the dictionary we are representing here, and this dictionary is going to have a value and a key association. That's a collection of key value pairs, you know. So that collection of key value pairs, I'm going to add it in one list, and that list is now having the dictionaries in them instead of having a tuples in them. Tuples will not have the keys associated with them, so it becomes very difficult for me to understand the meaning of that. That's the reason we have converted that into a tuple, and that, converted that into a dictionary. And now the dictionary is what I'm going to say. It's not the JSONify result, it's a JSONify product is what I'm looking for. And if I go back here and send the request now, just see what happens. If I say run, wow, look at that. Now this makes a lot of sense. What is this? It's a description. Oh, what is this? It's an ID. This is a price, and this is a title. So basically, not only it makes simple to understand the meaning of that value, but also it becomes very easy for my client application to pass the result and display that in various different formats. I mean, if you are a client developer, or if you are a kind of, a HTML developer or JavaScript developer, you would have literally passed that data in terms of JSON, and you would have created a nice table implementation of it. It's very simple. I mean, I'm not going to show that right now here anyways, but just telling you that those who know how to write the code in JavaScript or HTML or CSS, they can get that data, and then they can simply write an HTML application out of it. It's very, very, very simple. But you have to do it in this way. I hope you can understand what is going on. So basically, this is a kind of a simple application where we are getting the list of products from a database by using a middleware layer. So that is a layer which is kind of giving me a chance to send to get the request from client, process it on the server side, and send a response back to the client. Okay. The code first approach. Is it possible to show the code first approach? I'm not getting you, Girish. What do you mean by that? Ketan, just take a generic program with separate DB and a utils file, please. Of course, yes. Not today, but tomorrow we are going to extend this program, because today we are just going to talk about a very simple get. But tomorrow we have to talk about the post, put, and delete as well. That's not the end of the story here. So that's just a beginning of the story. So today we just started with something like a get. Tomorrow I'll just create a simple application. I mean, though I said I'm not going to show the HTML and this one, but anyways, to make the application complete, I'll have to show you that. I mean, though you understand it or not, but still I'll have to show you that. So tomorrow example, we'll see a kind of a separate HTML page, a simple JavaScript page, and that when you click on the HTML page, it is going to send a request to the server, Python server, will get the data, will send the data, and then it will perform the client server communication like that. Okay, so that will be kind of giving you a whole idea about how to do the website development. Not only website, but the REST development, REST web services development using Python Flask. Okay. Yes. One more. What are you saying? I hope you are getting that point. You are saying, Vipin, can I replace my PHP script with the Android app by Python? Of course, yes. That's what we are kind of creating a middleware for. So anyways, if you're using a PHP script here, just replace that PHP with Python, because you see that Python is way simpler than PHP. I can bet on that. If you're writing a PHP code, which is going to be a little bit longer than that, in Python, everything is simple. So probably if I were you, I would have used a Python there, which is even faster than PHP, so yeah, you can, rather you should in this case, because that will give you a kind of insight how to use this in the real world. Okay, that's great. Okay, Ketan, that's fine. Girish, creating a table via Python code is in MySQL. That's the same thing, isn't it? Whatever you are executing here, I said that last time. If you, instead of using this one here, if you use a kind of a table, like create a table, blah, 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 and then if you execute it by using the cursor and if you commit the code, probably it will create a table for you. So what you write here is what is going to get executed. If you say select star from, it is going to execute select star from. If you say create table, it is going to create the table. If you say create database, it is going to create a database. So whatever you write here will get executed on the database side. Okay, so there is nothing different required as such to create a table, Girish, I guess, if you are getting it. All we have to say here is the query which I used here, create table, blah, 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 blah. If you just put it here and get it executed, it will automatically do the job. Okay. Okay. Next, Rohit, installing collected packages, it's dangerous. It's okay. Leave it right now. These are the warnings. We are in India, there are many warnings we just simply ignore in our day-to-day life. Just ignore it. Okay, chat question. Yes, Vijay, I'm going to talk about that chat tomorrow along with the application. Still, I have to talk about the matplotlib. Remember, so matplotlib and this, both of them, we are going to combine tomorrow with a kind of a nice website where we can just create a nice chat by using matplotlib, and we'll integrate that right inside our website. I'll show you that example tomorrow. Yes, matplotlib I'm talking about. Exactly. Vipin is, yeah, no problem. That's fine. Nikhil, you're saying, do we still need to use a Flask package if you deploy your application on AWS or middleware server? Without this, you cannot do anything on the server. So Nikhil, day after tomorrow, or I'll show you tomorrow itself, because tomorrow is a kind of logically last day of this one. Day after tomorrow will be the image processing part, but tomorrow is the last day of that server and other things. So I'll show you how to deploy this on the AWS. Those who have created the AWS account for the testing purpose, you can use that. If not, then you can just at least watch me doing it, and then you can do it later once you get the time or once you get the account in your hand. Okay, so tomorrow I'll show you how it can be done, Nikhil. Once we're done with that, I'll create an AWS account. AWS instance will install the necessary packages there, and then we'll get the things installed there. Okay, that will give you a complete idea from development to deployment. Okay, so you can share that particular website or share whatever you have done there with the other friends as well. Definitely. Rohit, object of row is not a JSON serializable. Absolutely, because you did not pass the correct data. If you are passing the correct data, it has to be the list of dictionaries. Just copy paste the code and see if it works, because it depends a lot on this one. If you have a spelling mistake, or if you have some mistake there in the query, it must have given you a kind of an error, which is not JSON compatible. That's what it is saying. Okay. Chandrakant, you're saying, can I reach from my mobile? Of course, yes, you can. Just go to your mobile. Okay, just give me a second, guys. So I went to grab my mobile. Sorry for that. So if I have a mobile, who's asking that? See, Chandrakant, if you open your mobile and if you just go to your website, the same IP address, colon, blah, blah, you definitely will get the response there, So let me just look at my IP address quickly, very quickly. IP config, I have config. And this is my IP address, 192.168.1.20. I'm going to come back here. Connect to which Wi-Fi am I connected to? Oh, I'm using this one. Fine, it's okay. So I'll connect to my same Wi-Fi. Connected to the same Wi-Fi is kind of necessary. So probably just make sure that you are connected to the same Wi-Fi. And I'm going to connect. I'm just going to put that URL here. /product. Just give it a try and see, you will get the response. I'm just going to show you that right here so that you will understand. Yeah, we are doing it in this way and we are getting the product here. Sorry, colon 4000 slash response. And probably if you can see here, you can see the response. I mean, it's very difficult for you to see it, but probably just trust me, it is there. Okay. And yeah, that is the way we can do it. Yeah, you can't see my screen. I knew it. There is a trust issue, I guess. Just kidding. Huh? Don't take it seriously. Let me just rebroadcast the service. What the hell is taking? Or I have too many options available here. Okay, so watch this and see whether you can get the data there. Okay, not this one. I want to go back to the iPhone. That's it. Here it is. So see this now. This is the product details I'm using. This is my IP address 4000. By the way, I am on mobile. Huh? So this is my mobile. If you don't believe me that, this is my mobile. So I'm on a mobile right now. If I use the same URL here, 192.168, blah, 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 you see I'm getting exactly same response. So basically, you can get the response on your desktop. I'm on desktop right now. I got the same response here. You go to your mobile and you still will get the same response. So it doesn't matter where you are getting the data from. That's what we have said last time. This is the kind of REST architecture. It's same for both desktop as well as mobile. You know, so it doesn't matter whether it's a mobile or whether it's a kind of a desktop. You still will get exactly same response there. So that's the benefit of having REST servers. Okay. Okay, Chandrakant, that answers your question. Vipin, you are getting 405, not allowed for 2 scripts. Just try to see whether you are writing the same piece of code. 405, that means you are not having a proper implementation of it. See the method spelling and other things. So you should have gotten that actually. Utpal, any notes for NumPy, Pandas, or I don't have them right now, but probably if I create them, I'll definitely share that with you. Okay. Rohit, this is running. I can say very good. You can see you are able to see the old code because of 2 reasons. Either you have not restarted it or you did not save the changes and restart it. That's one of the reasons. So save the changes, restart it. It will show you the latest changes. Okay. Okay. So hopefully now you know what exactly the web server is, how we can create it, and how we can send a request from client side or the mobile side and get the response from the server side. So this is what we have started with. In tomorrow's example, we are going to continue with the rest of the methods, post, put, and delete. I'll create a small website so that you will get an understanding of how the website will be created, how the server will be able to respond to every single request a website is making, and probably will deploy this application on AWS instance. Okay, so that's what the plan is for tomorrow. Okay, so I think it's better we can call it a day today. We'll continue this tomorrow, continue this journey tomorrow, and we'll finish it off tomorrow itself. Okay. Again, as usual, thank you very much for attending today's session. Appreciate your patience. I think tomorrow we'll continue this, and after tomorrow we are going to talk about the image processing. That's it. Okay. So thank you one more time for today. I'll see you tomorrow exactly at 8 o'clock in the morning. Till then, bye-bye. Have a very great day ahead.